Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. In today's video, I'll be checking out my transfer plans going into Game Week 35 and how I plan on setting up for the remainder of the FPL season, including a little look at the double game weeks that may or may not be happening very soon. Right then, so starting off with how Game Week 34 has gone for me so far, which of course was my free hit. Now, on the surface, it probably doesn't look that bad. It's a green arrow of around 50k, not exactly season changing, but 77 points is usually a game week score that I'd be pretty happy with. However, in this particular scenario, it feels like there are points that have been left on the table for me. So looking through my lineup, there's only two blanks so far, that being Palmer and Raul Jimenez. Now, Raul Jimenez, I feel, was pretty unfortunate not to return. I don't regret the pick. I think he had 7 shots inside the box against Southampton, including one fairly big chance from a header as well. Got booked, which you can't really account for, and ended up on 1 point. But the alternatives I was looking at in that forward spot were either Welbeck, who I believe blanked, and Evan Nilsson, who did get an assist but then got sent off, bringing him back down to 2 points. So it didn't really make much difference there. In the midfield, the only person who's blanked so far, still got Mbermo to play on Thursday evening, of course, is Cole Palmer. Now, honestly, having watched the game live, he didn't really get that involved in any attacking phases of play. I think he had something like 0.2 XA across the game and no shots on goal. So Chelsea are really struggling to create chances for him at the moment. And there were times where he could have shot and he just frankly didn't. So perhaps it was something I should have looked at a little bit closer. I was still pretty bullish on Palmer going into the free hit, given the fixture still looked pretty good on paper, and he was going to get 90. He's still on penalties. He's still on some set pieces. And honestly, looking around, there weren't that many other midfielders I loved the look of. Obviously, I was sacrificing a Newcastle midfielder by going double Newcastle defence, which we'll come on to in a second. But Harvey Barnes didn't return, who was probably the more likely of the two midfielders I was going to have instead of Palmer, potentially. And Murphy only got an assist. So it's not like I left loads and loads of points on the board there. When it comes to where I may have missed an opportunity, it's all in the defence. So I actually got a full roster of returns in goal and in defence. 6 points for Pope, Cucurella and Livramento, and a fantastic 11-point return from Ait Nouri. So no complaints about him in particular. Obviously, I missed out on Jose Sarr, but I do have him to thank because he kept the clean sheet, saved the penalty, of course, in the process, and therefore meant that Ait Nouri kept his clean sheet and probably resulting in him getting some bonus points as well, because without the clean sheet, he probably wouldn't have got the bonus points. So although I didn't have Jose Sarr, I'm still pretty glad he kept the clean sheet. And honestly, I wasn't massively considering having the Wolves double up in defense anyway. So I'll make my peace with that. I'm a little bit gutted that Cucurella didn't do anything more than he did. I think he was a little bit unfortunate not to get an attacking return. There are a couple of shots, I think a header at the back post, which nearly crept in, and he looked very attacking in the game. So 6 points from him. Again, I can't really complain, but it's when you start looking at the alternatives that you're like, yeah, maybe I missed out on something here. Finally, Livramento, 6-pointer. Again, it's your bread and butter. No attacking returns, no bonus points. And in a game week where Trippier, who hasn't had an attacking return all season, and actually going into this game week had worse underlying attacking data than Livramento did, as well as worse expected minutes, I do feel a little bit hard done by to come out of it with Trippier getting 15 points and Livramento only getting 6. Now, obviously, Trippier is historically a very good FPL player, but honestly, I didn't really consider even having him this free hit. Now, a lot of people went there. I couldn't really understand it. And obviously, I've missed out on 9 extra points because I didn't open myself up to having Trippier on my free hit. But getting your first 2 attacking returns of the season does feel a little bit fortunate. I could have probably made some peace with 1 attacking return. Those things happen. But to get 2 in one game after no attacking returns all season does feel a little bit unfortunate. However, people who went there, fantastic job. Obviously, it's worked out really, really nicely, and it was a good pick. I didn't consider it, so maybe that's on me. The other one I missed out on was Ryan Sessegnon, who was in and out of my starting 11 constantly all the way up to deadline. In the end, I decided against it because we didn't know that Robinson was injured. And I thought there was a risk that either Wilson, Traore, possibly even Willian could have started right wing ahead of him. It would have been harsh to drop him, but they could have started. And even if he started right wing, he was always likely to come off early in that situation, given all of the different prospects waiting on the bench to come on in that position. Now, as it happened, we didn't know Robinson was injured, but because he was, Sessegnon played at left back, and actually Harry Wilson started for Fulham at right wing anyway. So who knows whether Sessegnon would have started at right wing or not if Robinson was fit. But seeing the team sheet, I thought, okay, I probably wouldn't have picked him if I knew he was going to be starting as left back, and I probably would have avoided him anyway. However, obviously, getting the attacking return in the 90-something minute against my own club, Southampton, did hurt, especially considering that he wasn't getting forward much during the match because he was at left back. Now, he came forward for that attack, got his head on a cross, and came off with 11 points, which, considering the ownership for this game week was around 20% on the free hit, did hurt me a little bit. And again, it's more points left on the table for me. However, I don't want to moan too much. It does feel like my season, sadly, isn't going to end up being the success I wanted it to be. I'm just struggling my way to try and get to top 200k at this point. It's not what I would consider a successful season. And let's face it, no one's watching my content now because they're thinking I'm going to get a top 10k, top 1k rank. But I'm here to try and help you and to try and guide my season to the best possible finish at this point. And I do have a bit of an open debate in my mind as to whether I go really aggressive, have a bit of fun with it, and just pick the players I want to pick, or try and use this next 4 weeks as maybe almost a pre-season, a reminder of how to play the game correctly and make logical decisions that yield high expected points, and maybe just try and kind of practice good form and good FPL play going into next season and prove to myself that I can still make logical decisions, because I feel like at times I have been a bit unlucky this season, but also I've made mistakes. Asensio, Saka triple captain, arguably a mistake. I've made a couple captaincy calls earlier on as well that could have arguably been called mistakes. So I want to make sure that I'm playing FPL in the correct way. But at the same time, my season's kind of going nowhere. So do I have a bit more fun with it? Do I go a little bit more aggressive and try to see where I might end out? I think I'm 50-ish points away from top 100k, which would be the bar I would consider a successful season for me at this point. I don't think I'm going to get there, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. So let's take a look at my team, how it's currently set up, and some of my transfer plans going into game week 35. So moving on to my team as it currently stands, I've got one free transfer, 0.4 in the bank, and this is how I'm currently set up. I've got double Arsenal defence at home to Bournemouth. I also have Saka completing an Arsenal triple up. I'll come on to him in just a moment's time. But to start off with Raya and Saliba, they are 1-0 down in the Champions League after the Champions League first leg against PSG. They've got the reverse fixture next midweek. So there is a chance that they rest some players, considering the league is done and dusted now, and they do look fairly secure for Champions League football in terms of their league position. It would be very unlucky and unlikely for them to drop out of the top 5 at this point. However, if there were 2 players that I would back on to start every single game week, even with something really important coming around the corner, it probably would be Raya and Saliba. Raya in particular, because his deputy, Neto, is cup-tied against Bournemouth because that is his parent club. So Raya is going to start in almost all situations. And then you come on to Saliba, who is a 90-minute man week in, week out, and centre-back isn't the most exhausting position to be playing. So I still think that he's got a very good chance of starting this game. I'd put it up at around 90 to 95%. And even if he didn't, then let's say he gets benched against Bournemouth at home, it's very unlikely he comes on either. How often do you see a centre-back being subbed on, especially in a home game, in the 85th, 90th minute? It's very, very unlikely, barring some sort of injury. So I think I'm fairly safe there. And if he doesn't play, in that 5% chance that I'd give it, then Milenkovic can come off my bench away at Crystal Palace. And I think that's probably okay. Moving across to Gvardiol and Munoz, I think they're absolutely fine. Gvardiol is one of, if not the best defender to own for the remainder of the season, in my personal opinion. And then Munoz, although the fixtures don't look fantastic, and they do have obviously the FA Cup final in the back of their minds, there's still a little while to go yet, and I don't see any sort of rotation coming in for him. And it's still a home fixture, yes, against a pretty decent team, but Nottingham Forest's defensive data has fallen off a cliff, as has their attacking data, by the way. So perhaps it's not a bad fixture to be using Munoz, perhaps Sarr and Mateta. On that subject, moving into the midfield, Sarr at home to Nottingham Forest. Again, moving into this game week, I was a little bit apprehensive about having triple Crystal Palace. However, given the fixture and the scenario we find ourselves in, I don't think it's a nightmare to have to play triple Palace. Munoz is fine, objectively, as a single solo pick. Sarr has been brilliant in the FA Cup semi-final, very frustrating in FPL, but we know that the data's good and the attacking returns can come because we've seen it with our own eyes in the semi-final of the FA Cup. It's just whether or not he can convert that into the Premier League. And given the next two fixtures being Nottingham Forest at home, who've had their defensive problems as of late, and then it's Spurs after that in game week 36, I still don't think they're a desperate sell for the next couple of game weeks. Perhaps by the time you get to game week 38, you want rid of them or to minimise exposure to Crystal Palace. But I don't think it's something that you urgently need to sort out in your team right here, right now. And given that I've only got one free transfer, anything that I do beyond selling Saka would probably be, well, it would be for a hit. And I don't really see any midfielders that are necessarily worth an extra 4 points on top of what I'd expect Sarr to score this week. So I'll probably hang on to Sarr for the time being. Murphy comes into my starting 11 ahead of Asensio. Asensio is always just going to be a minute's risk. I do regret bringing him in, and he's someone that I probably will have to solve as an issue in the next week or two. Possibly even for a hit this game week. But as you can see, I'm currently benching him anyway. So any player I bring in not only has to beat him by 4 points, but also probably has to beat someone like a Sarr or a Murphy by 4 points. And I just don't see that happening in most scenarios. Murphy is coming off early, and he has been consistently coming off early around the 65th, 70th minute for most of the season. He's had the odd 90 minutes here and there, but he usually does get brought off a little bit earlier. That being said, the attacking data is still very much good enough for me to hold on to him. I didn't think it was quite good enough to use on a free hit. And out of the two, I'd probably favour Barnes right now. But is it worth a transfer? Not in my mind anyway. That is absolutely not something I'm considering doing. And Murphy is a great value pick. I'm happy owning him for Brighton. And Brighton itself is not a bad fixture. I think they've conceded 13 goals in their last 5 games now, including 2 against West Ham. So Newcastle being one of the best attacks in the league, I'm more than happy to double up on their attack against Brighton. They should be fully rested. I expect Murphy to continue starting at right wing, even with Gordon sort of coming back to full fitness. I think it's Barnes versus Gordon on that left wing, and then Murphy. They really rate playing him for his defensive acumen as well as his attacking potential. And I just can't see them mixing that up too much. Yes, he'll come off early, but can he do damage in 65, 70 minutes? I think so, yes. So he's a starter for me, and I actually expect him to do pretty well this game week. Into the forward line, because I don't think we need to talk about Salah, I will maybe assess my captaincy option in my actual team selection video tomorrow. So I won't go on to that too much in this video. So moving into my forward line, Isak and Marmoush, I'm very happy to own for this game week. Marmoush arguably is an outside contender for captaincy. We still haven't seen it, but we expect him to be on penalties with Haaland out. There are some rumours that Haaland's back in training, so keep an eye out for that, but I would not expect him to be a factor in game week 35, possibly by the end of the season, but I think Marmoush is safe for now. And even if Haaland comes back, I still expect Marmoush to get good minutes. So I think he's fine. It's a good home fixture. Wolves have been in a great run of form. I think 6 wins on the bounce now. But if you look at each individual fixture they've played, you'd be expecting them to pick up points in most of them. So yes, they're in good form, but I still expect City to be a much tougher test for them. And I expect Gvardiol and Marmoush to be good holds, even against an informed Wolves side. So he's going nowhere. Isak is probably going nowhere, although arguably, if we're talking about transfers, Watkins is on my radar, and it is an option for me moving into game week 35 and beyond. I think Brighton's a great fixture, so I don't think I'm likely to make the move this week, considering Watkins plays Fulham at home. But Watkins' minutes should be very, very secure going into the back 4 game weeks with Marcus Rashford likely out for the season now. And that means that he's lost his competitor for that centre forward role. And the last 2 games of the season against Spurs and then Man United, 37-38, seem like a great little run to be picking up Watkins for, when Newcastle possibly don't have the best few fixtures to end the season with. So that's a potential move. However, given that my one free transfer this week is likely to be downgrading Bukayo Saka to Mbeumo, that would give me a lot of money to upgrade another striker, that being Mateta possibly, in the next few game weeks, rather than Isak. And Isak, even if the fixtures don't look fantastic, I still back him to do pretty well. I think he's an elite striker, and elite strikers tend to do well even in middling to lower than average fixtures. So I'm hesitant to get rid of Isak as a player who's on penalties, gets good minutes, has fantastic data in a fantastic attacking team, for another player who probably ticks most of those boxes but doesn't have the benefit of penalties. However, if I were to sell Mateta for him, I could probably get on board with it a little bit more. And it looks like a really strong forward line for the last few game weeks of Watkins, Marmoush and Isak. Now, I don't think that's a move that I necessarily want to make this week, because I don't think Watkins is a standout better option than Mateta. Nottingham Forest at home for Mateta versus Fulham at home for Watkins, I think it's pretty much 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. There's not much in it, and it would be for a hit, so I'm less likely to make that move now. But I think it's a move that I could look at making, possibly after game week 36 is done and dusted. So Mateta's just played Spurs. He's about to go into that final of the FA Cup, and I can probably look at getting rid of him then for someone like a Watkins, who goes into a great patch of 2 fixtures to wrap up the season. Now, moving on to Bukayo Saka, I've already mentioned that my likely transfer will be for Bryan Mbeumo. And I don't think that'll be a surprise to anyone. I think everyone making content this week is likely to be recommending Mbeumo. I've already done so myself. And I don't think there's much more that I can say that will convince you either way. If you want Mbeumo, you're going to go get him, probably after Thursday night is out of the way, because they've still got that game to play. But if you don't want him, you're probably a little bit sick and tired of hearing why he's such a good FPL asset, right? So I'm going to keep it very brief as to why I would bring in Bryan Mbeumo in my team. He's a lock for minutes. He's going to get 90 minutes every single game week between now and the end of the season. He's on penalties. He's got great underlying attacking data. And just take one look at Brentford's fixtures. Obviously, this week, Man United at home, who will either rotate or have one eye on the Europa League semi-final. And then it's Ipswich after that. And you could arguably captain him in both of those 2 fixtures. And then the next 2 fixtures afterwards aren't looking too bad either. So Mbeumo for me is an absolute lock. He makes a lot of sense in my scenario, because not only is he a great player that I expect to get good minutes, but he replaces a player who's more expensive. So it saves me money and it means I can make moves elsewhere. But that more expensive player, I'm not even sure he starts in game week 35. I'm pretty sure that he gets rested, considering that PSG are 1-0 up in the semi-final of the Champions League against them. They're going to want to rest players. He did play 90 minutes against PSG, so I don't think it's a fitness concern anymore. I think if they weren't fighting in Europe, he'd be getting 80, 90 every single week. But considering they've got Nwaneri, who is a very able right winger, to come on in his place, and they've got barely anything to fight for in the Premier League, I just feel like Arteta is very likely to not use Bukayo Saka. Maybe give him 30 off the bench to keep him fresh and match fit, but they're going to want to wrap him up and make sure that he is fit for that semi-final second leg against PSG. So for me, he's an almost certain sell. I am waiting to hear on double game weeks, and honestly, I was waiting to actually record this video because I was hoping that we get double game weeks announced on the Monday or the Tuesday, but we still haven't had it at time of recording. It's Wednesday morning, and knowing my luck, I'll post the video and we'll get double game weeks announced. But even if there are, that's in game week 36, and I don't think that much is going to put me off of going for Mbeumo over Saka as my one free transfer this week. It might make me more likely to bring in a Watkins a little bit earlier, or possibly switch Asensio to a Rodgers if Aston Villa got that double game week. Spurs, possibly not that interested. And then you've got teams like Man City, who I've already got a double up on. I could go triple up with KDB, possibly, but again, his minutes are a little bit shaky. And if I was to go with KDB, it would probably be in game week 36 itself for the double game week, should they get it. I've already got Triple Palace, and they're one of the teams who could have a double game week in 36. And other than that, you've got Bournemouth potentially, but again, I'm not that convinced right now in which of the assets I'd be going for. So overall, I think Mbeumo probably makes the most sense for me. It is boring. I know that everyone's going to be making a very similar move, or at least a large majority of people are making a similar move, but it feels like one of those weeks where Mbeumo is the obvious pick, but he's obvious for a reason. And as long as nothing weird happens on Thursday night, he will probably be my transfer in. Now, the other player that is just on the, maybe in my peripheral vision, let's say, is Yohan Wissa, and complete a Brentford double up. I do like him a lot as a pick, and him and Watkins are both in my attention, let's say, for the next few game weeks. I could go early, bring Wissa in now, but my forward line looks okay. And again, it would be for a hit. So I need to have this high bar on what I'd expect from Wissa. And if I ran the simulation 100 times, do I expect him to outscore any of these three strikers by 4 points more often than not? I'm not so sure I do. So I'm probably going to leave Wissa for now. Maybe look at bringing him in the next couple of game weeks. But for the time being, I think just one free transfer is absolutely fine. Before we wrap up the video, a quick word on Everton, who a few people are talking about because they do have some incredible fixtures to wrap up the season, including 2 relegated sides at home, including that one at Goodison Park against Southampton in game week 37, which will be their final ever game at Goodison Park. So they're going to want to go out on a high. Are there any Everton players that I'm looking at right now? I don't think so. No, I'm not bringing in any of their forwards this game week. And even later down the line, Beto or Ndiaye aren't really tempting me right now, or Broja as well is also an option. All of them are getting reduced minutes. All of them are subbing in and out for one another. And the data's not great in any of their cases either. And although the fixtures are good, I back the strikers I've got over them right now. So I might change my mind by the time we get to game week 37, perhaps. But I don't really feel the romantic side of it as much as maybe some other managers do. And although it's a very good fixture at home to Southampton in game week 37, I certainly wouldn't be buying them now. And I will probably make that decision later on down the line and see whether there's a slot open in that forward line for me to bring in an Everton player. Defensively, I think I'm covered for now. I don't need to look at a Mikalenko, or obviously Tarkowski's out for the season. It weakens them defensively a little bit. I don't think there's many options there that I'm loving, especially over that I've already got. And in midfield, there's almost nothing. There's Dwight McNeil, there's Decore, but neither of those really fill me with much hope. So I'm probably going to swerve Everton for the time being. As we wrap up today's video, let me know if you've got any questions in the comments section below. If you've enjoyed today's video, leave a like, hit subscribe. That'd be greatly appreciated. And I'll see you tomorrow as we lock in my team selection ahead of the deadline. And fingers crossed, we get an announcement either way on double game week 36, or whether or not it's going to all stay in game week 37 as planned.